When you're feeling anger and you really don't want to be mad, when you're feeling irritated and you really don't want to feel that way, can you relax about it? Can you allow that emotion to flow through you? Honestly, every feeling that arises needs a pathway. It needs to be allowed to flow through your body. What you can control is how you express that feeling. Peace, family. Welcome back to A Moment with Zen. I am Zen. I am a spiritual coach, a healer, a sound healer, a hypnotist, and I specialize in assisting people with uprooting childhood and intergenerational trauma so that they can inherit their true legacy of mental, psychological, physical, and emotional well-being. I'm so excited to have you here with me again today for another conscious communion as we grow in spirit and in healing. And so today I feel called for us to spend a little bit of time talking about control. Control has been something that shows up very loud, very proud, and often very annoyingly in my own experience, and honestly, it has been something that I've really been having to come back to over and over again along my own journey. My journey with healing my relationship with control has shown me truly that the moment you think that you've healed one thing, Spirit's gonna bring you right back and be like, oh, you think you're done? Hey, how about look at this again? Let's look at this from another lens. And so over the past weekend, I was called to do a lot. I was called to do some deep inner work of my own. I'm in a phase where I'm evolving, I'm shedding, I'm growing. And what was happening prior to me being called to do that deep work was my mind got really, really loud. I started to hear my ego voice, but y'all, the ego is so sneaky. It's so sneaky. That ego voice was trying to disguise itself as my voice, which it will do. And it really was speaking a lot about what it doesn't like, what it doesn't want, what it's not about to do, XYZ. And what I noticed was my control issues were really coming to the front. I spent some time with my family, and if y'all's families are anything like mine, your families are going to show you exactly where you aren't healed. I be walking around here thinking I'm the bee's knees, thinking I'm the stuff, y'all. I've been reading all the books. I've been doing all the things. I'm sitting here telling y'all what to do. But the moment I get around my family, it's like I'm reverted right back into 8-year-old self, teenage self, young adult self. And I'm having to, again, try to apply the lessons I've learned about control, about my tendency to want to control, about self-control, and all that other jazz. So I was spending some time with my family, and I was cooking a meal. And so if you cook, you know that there is only one cook in the kitchen. There's only space for one cook in the kitchen. And I swear that my little sister was put on this earth just to annoy me. She's been annoying me since she came out of my mom's portal. She was definitely one of my biggest button pushers. So I'm in the kitchen, I'm cooking, and I'm trying my hardest to be a nice, good, big sister this day because I see her standing at the edge of the kitchen really wanting to come and interact. And so I say, hey, how about you go get the mushrooms out of the refrigerator for me? She's like, yeah, I'll do it. So she goes to get the mushrooms out of the refrigerator. Mind you, I'm marinating portobello mushrooms in this jerk marinade, and I'm about to make these vegan jerk wonton tacos. She goes to get the mushrooms out of the refrigerator. She opens the mushrooms and she eats one. When I say in that moment, I lost it. And it took me 2.5 seconds to come back and realize what happened, but in that 2.5 seconds, the damage was done. She halfway bit through that mushroom and then she went to throw it away. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, if you're gonna do all that, I'm not gonna eat the mushroom. And so then she goes upstairs and she's having a fit about it. So what I would have done typically is just let her have her fit, because ain't nobody tell you to eat the mushroom. I told you, just bring me the mushrooms. Boundaries, okay? Boundaries. But in that moment, I went upstairs. I talked to her about why I exploded. I told her that that wasn't necessarily the proper thing for me to do, but I also talked to her about boundaries. But in that moment, what happened inside of that explosion, all of the ways in which I felt out of control and my childhood came to the front in that one moment. Because really, I realized if somebody else would have ate that mushroom, honestly, I wouldn't have been mad. It wasn't about the mushroom. It was about, I'm in this situation that feels so familiar. I'm in this space with people who feel so familiar. And now I've been thrown right back into feeling out of control of my situation. And so that, in that, I be kind of perfectionistic. So I felt the type of way about losing control, but it was what it was. I gave myself grace, but I was allowed to see in that moment where I still was. The nature of control. Control has a way of showing up inside of our experiences in so many different ways. And like I said, y'all, this is the ego stuff. It's so sneaky. It can be so subtle. Other ways in my past that I used to try to gain control over a situation. Control had such a hand in my relationships that there was absolutely nothing that anyone could possibly do to satisfy me. Absolutely nothing. Because what the control was trying to do was trying to make things perfect. But make things perfect according to who? It didn't know. I didn't know. And so no matter what someone did, I would always find a boundary to set. What I found in my own journey is there is a very fine line between control and boundaries. And so if anything fell outside of what was comfortable for me and what felt safe for me, and again, safe for me is very subjective because I was very unaware at this point. So anything that even triggered me to just where I would feel even the slightest bit out of control, I would immediately erect a boundary. And what that turned into inside of my experience was the over amplification of perfectionism. And what I started to realize was even perfectionism in itself is a way of trying to control. For me, I'll say, my perfectionism was a way of trying to control the way that I was viewed by others and myself, really, because it turned into me talking to myself a certain type of way if it wasn't right, if whatever I was doing wasn't perfect. Inside of my own perfectionism, I also found that I was trying to lend this air of predictability to my experience. If I could just know exactly what was going to happen, if I could line things up in a way to where I would know exactly what was going to happen, then that gave me this air of control over my life. It gave me this air of control over my experience, but it also created less space for me to experience disappointment. And that's really what that's about. That's really what control is about. How can I create an experience in so many different types of ways to where I don't experience the same disappointments that I've experienced in the past? This has everything to do with childhood trauma and things that have happened inside of our experience that we just did not like, things that made us feel helpless, things that made us feel not safe. And so now the control weaves its way into your relationships. You need your partners to be absolutely predictable. The control now weaves its way into you surrendering to spirit. You need everything that happens in your life to be absolutely predictable. And so now in your spiritual journey, you do things like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Something that I did, and now I laugh at myself. When I first started using oracle cards, I know spirit was just laughing at me, watching me be an absolute control freak. When I started to use my oracle cards, I would be asking them cards every question about everything. And it got to a point where I started to then observe myself, and I was like, you're an absolute maniac. You are an absolute maniac for trying to know how everything is going to unfold in your experience. But there was so much untouched trauma. There were so many things in my childhood that had happened that I hadn't addressed. And so my control was on the forefront. And so I don't know one human being who isn't trying to control some aspect of their experience in some way, shape, or form. And it wasn't until I started to lean into what it means to be still and what it means to actively surrender. It's interesting for surrender to have to be an active thing, because surrender, when we think about surrender, it's I'm deciding to do nothing in essence. I'm deciding to think not. I'm deciding to accept. I'm deciding to flow. But undoing the control in your experience, or rather undoing your tendency to need to have a hold over everything and need to know everything that's going to happen, is absolutely something that's active. So here are a couple of ways that you can start to practice surrender in the name of relinquishing some of the control that you have over your experience. So one, the very first thing that I did in changing my relationship with control was relaxing in traffic. And that might sound crazy, but I know that y'all be going absolutely buck wild in the car in traffic. And you cannot control the flow of traffic. You can't control what happens on the highway. So in those moments where I was in the car and traffic was happening, right? Because it's just happening, and the desire to control is having issue with the way the world is happening. You can't control the way the world is happening, but there's a part of you that finds issue with it, and now you big mad, and you big mad for no reason, and you can't do anything about it. So in traffic, I was just like, I can relax about this. I'm sitting in the car. I can't make it go any faster. But what I can control is the way that I feel right now. What I can't control is my own state of being in this moment. So one, you relax about traffic. And that phrase itself, can you relax about this, is going to be one of the key things to say to yourself as you're starting to undo your tendency to want to control. So two, you go into your relationships and you start to be okay with the way other people are. This doesn't mean that you don't set appropriate boundaries, right? But the setting of a boundary doesn't mean that you're telling someone what to do. And it doesn't mean that they actually have to honor your boundary. It doesn't mean that they have to do what you say. But you say, you know what? They're doing something that's really just stirring me up on the inside. And I can relax about that. Sure, I feel called to say something about it, but I can say it in a manner where I'm relaxed, because I'm going to relax about that. I'm going to relax about what they're doing, because it's not about what they're doing. It's about how you choose to operate inside yourself. And so this, I'm hearing to say this specifically for parents and children. You're going to have to relax about what your kids are doing. Children are just being children. 2-year-olds throw tantrums because they need to release the energy from their body. Teenagers, they do what teenagers do. And it makes no sense to try to control every aspect of your child's life. So there are so many things that you're just going to have to relax about. And so this is with children, parents, partners, whatever it is. I can't control what they're doing, so can I relax about it? And so then even with yourself, when these dense, lower vibrational emotions are coming up, when you're feeling anger and you really don't want to be mad, when you're feeling irritated and you really don't want to feel that way, can you relax about it? Can you allow that emotion to flow through you, knowing that sometimes feelings will arise that need to come up? Honestly, every feeling that arises needs a pathway. It needs to be allowed to flow through your body. What you can control is how you express that feeling. It's a matter of you choosing how you will express it rather than letting it express you. And most of the time, you just let the feeling express you, really. You feel mad and then you roar. You feel mad, and then the same scenario where I was cooking and my sister ate my mushroom, and I let my anger express me, versus taking a breath and then pushing the emotion out and allowing it to flow from the crown to the feet. So, as you're feeling things that maybe you don't want to feel, can you ask yourself, can I relax about that? And relax about the fact that this is what I'm feeling right now. So that's that on control. Those are 3 ways that you can start to unravel however control is showing up inside of your experience. So now we're going to segue from control to how does a person stop masking, which in essence, masking meaning wearing a face that's not truly yours, wearing a persona, which the word persona means mask, putting on a persona that is inauthentic to who you are. This is also a way of control. This is a way of controlling the way that others perceive you, but it's also a way of repressing parts of yourself that perhaps you feel aren't good enough to see the light of day. So when it comes to masking, this is something that 99.9% of people do. This goes back, and I know we've talked about the ego a couple of episodes back, but we'll bring it back here for just a moment. This goes back to the formation of your ego as that 2-year-old. When you were observing your parents, you were observing your environment, you're observing everything that's happening around you, and you're receiving these environmental cues, honestly, sometimes very loud verbal cues about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I feel called to touch a little bit on masculine and feminine energy with this. The way that our little boys had been raised was boys don't do this, boys don't do that, girls don't do this, girls don't do that. And so what happens is the feminine identity of our boys and young men, it gets pushed into the shadow. It gets pushed into the dark. And then the same with women, the masculine identity gets pushed into the shadow. And so this morphs into an overly, I'm gonna put big quotes, overly masculine persona that doesn't allow any feminine energy to flow through. And so now the mask you're wearing is this very macho mask where there's actually a little boy who found dolls very interesting in there somewhere, and who doesn't allow any aspects of feminine energy, any softness, any vulnerability, any heart openness. It doesn't allow those aspects of being to exist. And then now you've got the same on the opposite end of the spectrum, when perhaps that little girl was not allowed to do anything that was deemed what boys do. And so now the mask, the persona that's put on is, I'm going to say overly feminine, but in essence, it's still masculine in a way because it's not allowing itself to freely flow. And so what we'll call this is performative femininity in that case. What you have then is the woman who maybe has a little boy inside of her who liked to go roughhouse and play who likes to go roughhouse and play in ditches and play outside and roll around in dirt. Maybe she wasn't allowed to do that. And so now she's wearing this persona that doesn't allow for the balance of her own energies. And so you can take that with any example, whatever it is that was in you, whatever it is that you were born with, because in essence, you were born whole. Your child self is the self that knows exactly who you are. Whatever it was that you were told was not acceptable as a child, things may have happened in your life that were traumatic. I've also witnessed people who were taken advantage of as children. And so now their softness and their vulnerability was put in the closet because now they've got to protect themselves. And so they're wearing now an overly protective mask, an overly protective persona. So you can dig into your own situation and dig into your own situation by taking yourself back to maybe one situation that you can remember in your childhood, whatever's the first thing that comes. And ask yourself whether there was something that happened maybe when you were 5, maybe when you were 7, something that you were doing and you were told not to do that. You were told not to express that. And even if it wasn't a verbal telling, maybe it was a look that you saw on an influential person in your life space. Maybe it was your mother, maybe it was a father, maybe it was a cousin. Because I've seen that as well, where simply the look that someone gives you tells you that this is not okay. It's not okay to be like this. And so now you take that part of you, you throw it in the closet, and now you've spent the rest of your life masking and wearing a persona that's not of the true self. So do that exercise, okay? Go in the comments, let me know how it went. Now, how do we stop masking? How do we lift a persona? So a couple of exercises that I give people that I work with is the one I just gave you. We go back to the childhood and see what exactly happened as to why these attributes aren't being allowed to live. And so something that I did in order to help myself with seeing the parts of myself that I wasn't allowing to live. And the interesting thing about this is you can only repress for so long. The longer you repress, the wilder those aspects are going to be when you finally open the door to that closet. And at some point, if you continue to repress them long enough, then they're gonna spiral out of control, and that's when y'all be outside doing wild and crazy things because you're not allowing yourself to live in your fullness. So an exercise that I did was I made a list. I made a list of the things that I judged about other people. I looked at that list, and as I was writing the list, I had to be very honest with myself. So I've mentioned this before, and I've gotten questions like, well, I don't really like it when people lie. I don't like it when people cheat and things of that nature. Okay, cool, fine. You know, even looking at it that way, in a way, is your ego really trying to cover up what's being repressed. But let's take lying and cheating then, for instance. Lying and cheating wasn't on my list because I'm very honest with myself about the fact that I lie to myself. I lie to myself very often. And so if lying is on your list, look at the ways in which you lie to yourself. That's how you bring that to light. And now you go deeper into that. Why exactly am I being dishonest with myself? What am I protecting by being dishonest with myself? And whatever it is that you're protecting, that is the aspect of yourself that you need to allow to live, because now you've got it under a rock. And so let's go into cheating. People say they dislike people that cheat. This goes into dishonesty, but we can also look at people that quote unquote cheat as people who are very brazen, people who are bold, people who have an attitude of, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to kick ass and take names. I'm going to operate with no boundaries. And so my question is, are there aspects of yourself that wish you could be more bold? Are there aspects of you that wish you could operate more brazenly? So that's how we break that down. You don't necessarily look at the exact thing. Let's look at jealousy and envy. Jealousy and envy are shadow emotions, but the other side of that is, I wish I could. I wish I could do this. I desire more of that. Otherwise, those feelings wouldn't come up in you. And so I made this list for myself of the qualities that I judge in others, and also the things that I really just could not stand in others. And as I looked at that and I broke it down in that way, it doesn't necessarily have to be literal, but I dug into the deeper implications of those things, and I was able to see the parts of myself that I was repressing. One of the things that I judged in others were people who were just very loud and outspoken, because I wore this persona as someone who was very calm and meek and mild at all times. I would wear a very even keel persona, when what I really wanted to be doing was cutting up the dance floor. I really wanted to be yelling and shouting to the mountaintops, and I really wished I would allow myself to do that. But since I wouldn't let myself do it, in order for me to observe that desire, because the desire was so deeply buried, in order for me to observe that I even had that desire, I had to first judge it in another person, see the mirror, and come into a space of awareness where I was able to see that it was a mirror and see that I was projecting, and boop, have it bounce right back. Everything that you dislike about others is not a projection. Some things are just the product of your trauma. Some things are, you know what, I've experienced this type of person, that energy feels traumatic, and so now it's triggering. Sometimes it's like that. So use your discernment as to which things are triggering a trauma response and which things are projection. But when we look at this from the highest spiritual light, from the highest spiritual lens, in order for you to come to a space of wholeness, a space of full self-acceptance, and the more you accept yourself, the more you can accept whatever it is about others. So if ever you find yourself not accepting something about someone else, come right back in. What is it that I'm not accepting about myself? The less you judge yourself, the less you will judge things outside of you. That's just the way it goes. So you stop masking by taking a deep dive into all of the parts of yourself that you have stuffed into your closet, all of the energies that you're repressing, the desires you're repressing, all of the things that you really just wish you could do. What is it that you're stuffing down there? When you allow those things to see the light of day, and when you stop giving a damn about what other people are going to think, because really everybody's thinking about themselves. Anybody worrying about you? Everybody's thinking about themselves, I promise you. Everyone's number one focus is themselves. Whenever it is that you're feeling you really want to let this energy fly, you start to become afraid that you'll be judged. You want to control the way people see you. People are going to see you through their own perception. So no matter what you do, they're going to see you through the lens of their experiences, their life, their trauma. So the best thing that you can do is to accept everything about you. Everything. Be compassionate about what you feel and what you hear. Try not to judge what you feel and what you hear about yourself. And then you start to allow those things that you bury to come to the surface. So now, how do you find yourself spiritually while healing? There are so many different ways to look at what it actually means to heal and what the healing process actually is. One definition that I love of healing is that healing is accepting all and choosing best. We can also look at healing as a process of undoing rather than thinking that you need to receive more or gather more. As we spoke on earlier, you came into this world whole. Your child self is the fully realized version of you. And so it's as you're growing, as you're soaking up all the things that are happening around you, that you start to put on these layers of self that are not the true self. And so then you get to a point now where you just can't take it anymore. You're feeling like you're out of your mind. Some of you have probably experienced psychotic breaks, which that is just a call to propel yourself into your spiritual journey. It's just it's a spiritual experience. And so now when it comes time where you say, I need to heal, there's something wrong with me and I need to heal, all that needs to happen is now you need to undo. The healing process is undoing everything about yourself that's not true. It's about unraveling every single lie that you've told yourself about yourself. It's about unraveling every single lie that your experiences, your parents, your teachers, your peers, society, all the things, every single thing that you have taken in to be true about you now in your healing journey, you are called to relinquish every single falsehood, and the biggest falsehood, the biggest lie that anyone has ever told themselves inside of this experience is that they are separate from the Creator. That right there is the cause of every single one of your problems, is that you think you're separate. You see yourself as separate. And so now you create these problems, and you create these blocks, and you create these walls that reinforce your separateness. So through your healing journey, you start to really discover who you are spiritually when you start to address every single lie in your life. How do you know it's a lie? If it's not of love, it's a lie. Period. If it's not of love, it's a lie. So if it is not reinforcing the highest version of you, if it's not reinforcing the highest thought, if it's not reinforcing the purest thought, and what is a pure thought? A pure thought is I love myself. A pure thought is I love myself. My Creator loves me unconditionally. And if my Creator loves me unconditionally, I can love myself unconditionally as well. If it's not that, it is a lie. So we don't have to go down the long list of all the lies, because you've got, create a list and make 2 columns. 1, the truth. The truth. I'm made in love. My Creator loves me unconditionally, and therefore I can love myself. Lies, everything else. And there you go. So on the other side of that list, whatever it is that was not on this side, you start to look at these things one by one and you unravel them. And what does that unraveling look like? Because somebody's going to say, well, how do I unravel it? You start to look at that, and now you tell yourself the truth. You go back here. I'm not worthy. Is that loving? No. Here's the truth. Okay, now, why don't I feel worthy? What is it that I'm telling myself? What's happened inside of my experience that has made me feel unworthy? And you know what's really interesting about this? This is a very Western way of going about healing, because in Eastern culture, they don't even do all this. But because of the way that the Western mind has been cultured, you gotta go through and unravel every little thing until you finally decide that you're worthy. You gotta go through and look at every moment that's ever happened in your experience until you just decide that you're worthy, because there is legitimately a thought that says that you have to suffer for your healing, that you have to suffer for your enlightenment. So I'm giving it to you this way, but you really don't have to do all this. You can stop it right now if you want to. If you decide that you deserve love, and that you deserve to be loved, and that you deserve to feel love, you don't have to go through all of these things in order to finally heal. You can just decide that, you know what, no matter what happened in my experience, I'm deciding to be okay. And so it doesn't matter what happened to me, because I don't have to suffer. I don't have to work. I don't have to put myself through the ringer for my healing. I can just decide now that I'm going to release everything that's ever happened to me. But you know what? You're not going to do that. You're not going to decide that. And so we do it this way. You make a list. You look at all the reasons why you don't feel like you're in love, and then you go one by one down that list, and now you dig into all of the reasonings until you finally decide that no reason is great enough for you not to feel whole. And that right there, is how you'll find yourself spiritually. You're already there. Honestly, I could give y'all 50,000 methods. There are so many different ways, so many different things that you can do in order to find yourself spiritually, but really you're going to be running yourself in circles when you're trying to find what's already there. So the best thing for you to do is to start to affirm your wholeness. To start to affirm that there is nothing wrong with you, that you have everything that you need, and you allow the healing to happen naturally. You allow whatever it is that needs to be done within you to start to work on its own time, to start to work on its own pace. You don't have to press. You don't have to push. You can operate in flow. This doesn't mean that you do nothing. This doesn't mean that you do nothing about things that are actually detrimental to your experience, but you understand that whatever it is that you're doing is in flow. And the more that you reinforce that there is nothing wrong with you at your essence, yes, there are things that need to leave you. That's fine. But you are not a broken person. You're a sick person. And so what do you do when someone is sick? You give them medicine. And the medicine is in the journey. The journey is the medicine. You'll find your medicine wherever you need it. And 9 times out of 10, the medicine is going to find you. This is the way it works. This is what happens when you're operating in flow. Start to look at all of the ways in which you are operating out of love. The thoughts you're thinking, the things you're saying, the way that you feel about yourself, the things you're doing to yourself. Really just look at self first, and then, you worry about the rest as it goes. But that's what I got for y'all today on that. All right, y'all. I have ran my mouth into the ringer today, but I hope and I pray that the things that we talked about really sank in and it was exactly what you needed. But before we go, we're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to pull an oracle card from this was my very first oracle deck. So it looks very raggedy, but you know that something's really good when it feels used. I don't even like to use new feeling cards anymore. If the edges aren't a little torn up, I don't even want to use them. So I'm going to pull a card from this deck as a message for the collective. So the first card that we've got is abundance. I said for the collective, but I think this is for me. But I am the collective, right? I'm part of the collective. All right. And so the oracle guidance says, your destiny is already written. You just have to tap into your inner strength to reach it. Destiny, noun, hidden power believed to control what will happen in the future, or fate. Everyone is born with a destiny. You may be living it, or it may be buried in a deep place and almost forgotten. In many ways, we have forgotten our path and our purpose. On your journey, you may meet others with similar stories to yours and unique perspectives based on their experiences. To reach your destiny, remain humble, learn what you must little by little, but never forget it. Ori, send me signs, visions, and people to assist me in reaching my destiny with grace and humility. This too shall pass. You, like each person around you, are a star, but the divine feminine inside of you makes you special. Part of understanding your feminine self is knowing you were not put on earth to suffer, but to nurture and be kind to yourself. No hardship lasts forever. Be confident and loving in yourself. Know that this too shall pass and you are still a star. Ori, help me learn ways to love up on myself and never dim my light. All right, y'all. That's the guidance. I pray that it landed. I'm not going to read today. That's enough talking. I'm not going to read today. All right. I pray that every single word that was said today touched the hearts, the minds, the souls, the bodies that needed it. I'm so grateful for you all for joining me again. And I can't wait to do this again. I'll see you next time. Amen. Namaste. Ashe.